have an opportunity to look at these two major issues, unpaid care work and gender inequality, and find solutions on how we can make policy and legal framework recommendations to our various governments in the region and ensure that we redistribute, empower our women, empower those disadvantaged, and ensure that we have a society which is equal insofar as gender redistribution is concerned.
We're very proud to host this conference on unpaid care work and social protection. And the main takeaways from the conference is that we need to restructure our economies so that we can support different forms of work and have more equitable distribution of work in not only the economy but also households and communities. The second point, I think, which is also important, is that we need to expand our social security systems in different countries of the region so that the care work load that is placed on women is not too much or too extensive.
For me, thinking on unpaid care work, it's for us to go back and look at how should we organize our communities in a perspective that we want all the members of the community to participate in the whole process of decision making. We need to consider our communities, our families as the center of all our policies, as the center of all our decision making. When we do that, I am sure that we will be taking care of each other. We will be taking care of those who are in need and who are depending.
Talking about social protection in Africa is already a huge thing, but bringing the gender dimension and focusing on unpaid care work, I think it's very important. Africa, and particularly after COVID, it's key that we have this discussion. So I feel like it's an important topic and it's something that is not really considered enough during or in different conversations.
Women are engaged in unpaid care work. They are the ones that are responsible in the household, but also even outside of the household. We see them in communities where they work as community health care workers, as caregivers. Crises such as HIV and AIDS, COVID-19 most recently, has also shown us that the carers tend to be women who are usually unrecognized and unpaid for the work that they do. And from the perspective of social protection, I think it is important that we put in place mechanisms that will ensure that women are accounted for, and that we put in place mechanisms that make the work easier.
Generally, the conference has been quite impactful, as in there's so much to learn, there's so much insight coming through just on the plight of the unpaid care workers and the realization also of their contribution actually to economic growth of any country. Like, they do so much and yet they remain unrecognized, they remain unrewarded, and yet, you know, if we had to put a stop to what they are doing, I think basically you can see economies even crumbling. We can really feel the effect as countries. So I think from this conference, I've gained so much appreciation of the work that is being done by the unpaid care workers, and more so just the realization that most of these actually are the women and the young girls out there who really need to be recognized and brought forth even in the line of policies and programs so that their welfare can be enhanced. And the other issue that is coming on is the question to say, have the girls, the girl child, have they really left behind the boy child? Are we doing too much for the girl child and forgetting about the boy child? So these are questions, these are issues that I think need interrogation going forward so that we can actually enhance the space of the unpaid care workers going forward.
We have enough resources in our various countries, we have enough resources in Africa, which we believe that if they are rightly deployed, they will provide social protections to everyone and everyone's life will be better. The societal stigma need to be dealt with, It's very important so that the women are not always be marginalized through the type of work that they are engaging into. And I'm sure that now that we have less time to 2030, in terms as a period for implementation of SDGs, it's very important that we have to intensify our campaigns, intensify our meetings, intensify our lobby to ensure that the proper policies are brought into play.
I think the amount of resources that are in the African continent or in continents in the south demonstrates the fact that we have enough resources. It's the corruption, it's the theft, it's the illicit financial flows and the manner in which our governments are motivating for development which actually perpetuates the problems that we're currently seeing. So what we need to do is revolutionize the way in which we see social protection, and one of the key things is in doing so is really fundamentally challenging the capitalist system in order to right the wrongs.
This FES conference, which is focusing on Southern Africa, is topical in that it discusses unpaid care work, gender inequality in the context of social protection. And the panel discussion in which I was involved sought to unpack all those key points. I spoke about the unpaid care work done in the informal economy, the work of workers in the informal economy, and also the precariousness, the vulnerability, and their lack or absence of social protection. Social protection is key in embedding the decent work in every form of work and in the workplace. And there is a marked absence of social protection and also decent work in the informal economy. Therefore, this conversation is quite critical for us to come together as a region, come up with strategies, come up with ideas, brainstorm, and also find ways in which we can convince our governments and hold them to account towards provision of social protection, because government has that responsibility to provide basic social protection to the workers in the informal economy.
When it comes to data, I think almost every office or every state that is represented would provide with statistics to say more women, it's factual, more women than men are involved in unpaid care work, and that takes them away from some of the work that they could be doing maybe productively to earn a living. Do we even have women having a voice, people that are directly affected? Do they even have a voice? Are they represented enough in the policy making? And one of the resolutions recommended is that the women need the political power. They need to be in policy making positions for them to be able to affect whatever policy that can proactively, that can help them to achieve gender equality.
Collaboration is also one big aspect because different organizations come with different power resources, but also in terms of how they approach things, because the civil society cannot work in exclusion with from trade unions and also from government institutions, for example, the Ministry of Labor, and these social security, for example, departments. So we need to find a collaborative approach in how we move forward, even in coming up with different solutions regarding unpaid work in general.
Each and every year our governments pass national budgets, and we have noted that most of the Southern African countries, they do have challenges to raise enough resources that can support social protection interventions. So the key question that should go to each of the countries is that can we develop strategies for generating more income? Because if we are talking about unpaid care work, obviously we need to have more money to support that. But where does the money come from? So individual countries have to reflect on what can be done in order to begin to mobilize more resources to cater for the unpaid care work that we are talking about.
I have learned a lot about the fact that there are some community-led initiatives that are really working to support social protection initiatives. So if the governments come together with the communities there is a possibility that communities will be highly socially protected. So it is both the role of the government but also the role of communities, so that we can ensure that our communities are well protected. So in this meeting it was very clear that proper management of domestic resources is required, so that those big group that is involved in unpaid care work can also be part of development processes.
There's so many innovative ways in which we can be deliberate about policy to ensure these issues are addressed, and we're hoping that even at the end of this conference we will continue conversations. I believe there'll be recommendations that will be taken at a higher level, and what we look forward to seeing is that the partnership can continue being active at national level to take these recommendations to the governments, to the policymakers, and start engagements. So we are hoping that FES will help us play a role in being deliberate in facilitating the discussions at national level with the different partnerships, and from there we can still come back at regional level and just recollect and see how best we can move forward as a movement that is advocating for addressing unpaid work and gender inequality.
One of the things that we learned amongst the solutions from the conference was the 5 R's, and one of those R's is to redistribute. The first thing obviously is to recognize that there is this burden that exists in our households, in communities, and what must be done is to focus on redistributing. How do we recognize the work that exists, and how do we ensure that we redistribute? How do we come up with policies to ensure that in the households these chores are recognized and they are shared equally amongst the male, the female, to ensure that we maintain this particular balance. We'll hopefully be able to go back to our own countries and engage the policymakers and ensure that the discussion of unpaid care work is something that becomes high on the agendas of our governments, on the agendas of the private sector, on the agendas of trade unions and other stakeholders that are involved in ensuring that we improve the lives of individuals in our own countries.
The conference on on unpaid care work, gender inequality in the context of social protection was so important in the sense that there hasn't been adequate attention to how unpaid care work can be a barrier in terms of empowerment of women, promoting gender equality. So it brought diverse stakeholders, and we had deliberations, and one of the key takeaways to really take the agenda to the Southern African Development Community, SADC, and we look forward to have a lot of stakeholders being involved, and also to make sure that we involve the trade union. We realize the trade union are very important, the civil society very important, the government and all other stakeholders. And we also agreed that we need to involve our communities, let everything be driven by the communities.
We can help address unpaid care work by incorporating gender mainstreaming within the social protection frameworks. This will help us have equitable and inclusive social protection flows.